I'm Jeremy Spence, Enterprise Analyst here at Manage Engine, and I'll be your host today. Today's conversation is one that you'll want to lean in for because it comes from someone who's been on both sides of the cyber war. Our guest today has seen the world of cybercrime from both sides. As a teenager, he hacked into one of Australia's major banks, and today he's one of the country's most trusted cybersecurity experts, working with leading organisations to protect their systems against all types of threats where he once exploited. Bastien Treptel is the co-founder of Control Cyber, a company that grew to be worth well over 100 million before being acquired in 2021. His latest venture, Ironclad ID, tackles one of the most urgent challenges facing businesses today: social engineering and identity-based breaches. He's the host of Cyber Hacker podcast and is known for fast-paced, eye-opening keynotes that unpack the mindset of a hacker, giving you clear strategies to stay secure in today's digital world. Bastien, we're thrilled to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you, Jeremy. Excited to be talking for Manage Engine and having a chat, see if we can be insightful, like you said.
Fantastic. Well, let's get started with something that really sets you apart. Obviously, as we mentioned, you've been on both sides of the cyber battlefield, and that gives you a really unique vantage point. Obviously, I mentioned in the intro again, you've hacked into a major bank, you've built a cyber company worth well over $100 million. What's something that you still notice immediately as a former hacker that most enterprises simply miss?
I think there's a lot of confusion in enterprise at the moment, especially from the senior leadership teams. They believe that if they check a whole bunch of boxes, spend all the right money, get all the right certifications, go through a governance, risk and compliance, they'll be safe. From my kind of adversarial world, we still have a 100% track record of breaking into every organization we've been paid to do so ethically these days. I think there's a bit of a misalignment in the criminal way of doing things and thinking to what the board think will lock out the criminals. And honestly, the criminals these days have such an impressive toolkit thanks to AI that it's pretty hard to lock out of all attacks.
Awesome. Let's switch gears and talk about how today's attackers operate, because it's not merely brute force anymore, is it?
No. So I would say if you look at a lot of the reports that have been out there, the social engineering is playing a huge role. AI is playing a huge role. We're lucky in a way that hackers are still making so much money doing traditional style attacks, because if they actually flipped and completely use the arsenal they have at their fingertips, I don't think many corporations are really ready. So for example, we're talking about combination attacks. So receiving a phone call that sounds exactly like the person you're expecting to hear from, telling you that you're about to receive an email. So your guard is down. You've got a call, getting an email, you're getting these combination attacks that are really important. Technology for data processing, signal processing. Just the fact that we're in this room and there are windows behind us, there's a whole bunch of really cool tech. We can surveil, we can get signals off HDMI cables, like you name it. The attacker suite is bigger bag than ever.
Thanks for that insight, Bastien. So could you maybe walk us through one real world breach that's played out in multiple stages where perhaps each step seemed safe until it wasn't?
Yeah, well, let's talk about the Marks and Spencer attack recently over in our friends in London. I think this was a really clever attack, right? So we've all heard of the traditional pick up the phone, pretend to be from IT support. Hey, you need to give me your password. I love the fact that these hackers flipped the script and went, we're actually a user. And they called up the IT support teams who've had probably more cyber training than anyone. And they managed to trick the IT teams into providing sensitive information, which was enough to actually get the attacker onto the network through the IT department. So yeah, it's just, I have to tip my hat. Hackers are fairly creative and their use of deep fakes, their use of flipping the script, their use of tools. There are so many amazing open source projects which are meant to be used for good that can be used for hackers. I mean, places like Reddit, places like the dark web is just absolutely breeding these ideas. So there's no shortfall of attack vectors for companies to deal with. And yeah, like an example, Marks and Spencer, they got hammered pretty nicely. Well, not nicely, badly, I should say. So I get a bit excited sometimes, even though I am a bad guy turned good. You can't help but respect some of these attacks.
Within that Marks and Spencer's attacks, what's something that really should have raised a red flag but didn't?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, indicators of compromise, we call them. And this is what I'm trying to, my new mission after selling out of CTRL Cyber is to raise awareness. And that is a huge indicator of compromise, right? So this is what's annoying for business leaders. Humans suck at cyber. I hate to say it, but they just do. And, you can have users of your systems, members of your systems, and they can do all the cyber training in the world and they'll still make mistakes. But in this particular case, the indicator of compromise from Marks and Spencer is they didn't validate the end user. They just assumed that it was a user trying to get onto the network and helped facilitate that process. So first of all, any organization, and I don't want to badmouth anyone. I think we need a cultural shift, not just here in Australia, but around the world, that, when an organization makes a mistake, we shouldn't be name calling and pointing. We should be more like when we see a flood or a fire, the community comes and helps. So I would love to get to the point where someone like a Marks and Spencer, other organizations go, hey, we've kind of solved for this. Do you need a hand? Instead of just going, oh my God, how could they have done that? Because we're all human. And the indicator there was they probably really needed to validate who the user was, make sure they're at least in the employee database. And if they are in the employee database, as it was this case, that they can answer some basic questions, which the hacker wouldn't have been able to if they went into any depth. Although, sorry to babble on, but the ability to AI to do deep research on people these days, maybe they did have a fairly deep understanding of the end user.
No, thanks for that. You sort of touched on it there in the previous question. But what is one recent attack method which sounds almost unbelievable to most, but has really worked like a charm? Is there anything else other than that?
Oh, there's a lot. So one that's really scaring a lot of organizations at the moment is what I call data and signal processing. Previously would have taken so long, but thanks to AI, I'll give you an example, right? So HDMI cable, it goes from your computer to your PC. You can now use a software-defined radio and AI and data signal processing, and you can actually, from a completely disconnected system, get a picture of what's on the monitor. We can also listen to people in rooms. We can get whatever it might be. And we did a piece for a weapons manufacturer, and they were shocked how much information we could get from their PCs from outside of the building. So sadly for them, they now have to go and RF shield their entire building and all their cables. So cyber is like this never-ending thing. And there's a kid or someone out there right now developing their next attack vector, and it's impossible to know what's going to come next, particularly with AI. And there's so many sort of frontier science and technology on the horizon. Quantum computing, you had the Chinese government the other day said they've got a working quantum computer that can break a 256 SHA algorithm, which is terrifying. You had BlackRock saying it's going to ruin crypto. Well, really, it would ruin everything. It would ruin crypto and traditional banks. So yeah, not specific to crypto. But yeah, there are so many just incredibly imaginative things. And like, you just need to go and spend a bit of time on GitHub. Any project that you can think of that is out there, someone's building it with the help of AI. And yeah, I think the tide has well and truly shifted towards a benefit towards the hacking side rather than the defensive blue team sides at the moment.
One of the trends that we've really noticed is that no matter how massive the budget and with the suite of all the tools in the world and all the resources in place, enterprises are still finding themselves blindsided when it really matters. So if I can just pick your brain about some of the gaps that money alone can't really fix, where is it that you say you would see well-funded companies fail, not necessarily for lack of tools, but because of a lack of mindset?
Yeah, great question. I mean, social engineering, there's no patch for humanity is a quote that I like to say. And I don't think boards are really adequately understanding the risk that their HR component to an attack plays. So if you look at the reports, some 90% of successful breaches in Australian companies have a social engineering component, and we don't yet have a great way to do anything about that. Now, I think there is a solution, which is, and I don't want to promote myself, but the new company that I've started does exactly that. It pairs humans and AI, because a human can look at an email and think it's okay, but an AI can zoom out and look at all these other things, millisecond response times, and give you a really good idea of whether that is actually a phishing email, give you a really good idea if it's a deep fake, whatever it might be. There are lots of indicators of compromise that you need to have a look at that an AI can do. But yeah, I think right now the biggest thing is social engineering and how easy it is to trick us humans, particularly when you're using those combination style attacks we were talking about before. You compare if an attacker knows your pets' names, where your kids go to school, your postcodes, all this stuff that AI can find out about us. And here's a little interesting tidbit as well. So you might think, hey, I've locked down my social media accounts, and you may have even told the organization you work for that your social media accounts are a low risk aspect. But there are plenty of copies of the internet from decades past, and you can get a copy of that, look at a specific piece of information. One that's used really often in OSINT is we'll get old pictures of people and find where they live. So if they haven't moved, they're geotagging you the photos, means we now know where your executive team lives or wherever our target lives. So the threat from social engineering is not well addressed because I don't think there's enough solutions for it. Until now, perhaps. But yeah, I'd say that's the biggest exposure point because we are starting to get pretty good on the technology front. But the new way of hacking is to identify the human in the organization that does what you need to get done maliciously. So set up a new client, transfer money, access data, access IP, knowledge of a tender, whatever it might be. There are people in your organization that can do that, and they have become our target.
So I'd like to talk a little bit about the gaps which money can't really fix. So where is it that you see really well-funded, well-resourced companies fail, not necessarily because of a lack of resources, but because of a mindset issue?
Yeah, absolutely. So social engineering, hacking the human is fairly prevalent, and the issue is boards aren't completely aware of it. The other problem is, you're right, it doesn't really matter how much awareness you create. And, there's multiple approaches for awareness. I think on the good side, you dangle the carrot rather than the stick. Like I've seen some amazing corporations do things that if we can get our click-through rate on a phishing email, we all go for company drinks, or maybe on the larger corporations, they're going overseas for a holiday or something, down to maybe the stick approach, which is, we're locking you off the network. You've got to go and do 50 hours of training. Otherwise, there's an official warning. But yeah, it's really not taken seriously enough. And you're right. The boards absolutely say this question. We've done everything right. We've followed all the steps. We're still getting breached. And I think the answer is pairing humans and AI. So an AI can zoom out of an email, can zoom out of a deep fake, and can look at all these thousands of indicators of compromise and notify a human, hey, this is likely to be a phishing email or this is a scam. Because humans, I'll give a great example, right? So one of the most successful phishing simulations I've ever seen was the staff employee bonus one. So it literally said just before Christmas, we've moved to this fantastic new staff benefit scheme. You need to log on to this portal. Make sure you do that before this date. Otherwise, you're not going to be eligible for this year's bonus scheme. Everyone freaks out. It's something like a 75% click-through and credentials rate, where an AI would just see that instantly. So yeah, I think boards are in a good position where for the first time ever, there is some tooling around that can help social engineering, but it's all very new.
That one's a bit of a tough pill to swallow. Obviously, such a common pattern. We're seeing much more false sense of security. Like you mentioned, we're in a day and age of so much training and awareness that you've spoken about. But is there one tool or one approach in particular that in 2025 is giving too much of that false sense of security, or maybe more than any other tool?
I don't think it's a tool. So, you've got all these great technologies out there, a lot of them AI driven now, your endpoint detection, your XDR, your SIEM, your USM, all of that working together to really analyze data and look for a threat. The issue, I guess, is that there may not really be many indicators of compromise when you look at that new style of hacking. If you're going about your everyday job and your job perhaps is to onboard new third parties into your organization, and myself as a hacker set up this completely fictitious company, and I just go through all the right steps, but then I am onboarded into your organization. In fact, I might even have a product or a service that I can sell to you. What are the indicators of compromise there? It is super difficult. So the problem is culturally. And I don't mean to speak badly about IT guys. I actually think IT guys are the most amazing. They've got one of the hardest jobs on the planet. I think some recent studies show that they're only really able to do about 21% of their job or something. because, IT guys look after everything from the telephones to the garage doors to IT support, patching, upgrading. It's a huge role. So all the IT guys, I feel for you out there. But they quite often will report to the board and say, now we have these tools in place, it would be very difficult for a hacker. I mean, you look at some of the billboards we see on there, layers and layers of security, fraud protection, you're safe from hackers. I don't think anyone today is really safe from hackers. So let's create some awareness to say, like, for example, some of the banks today, they operate in a mindset that there is always a malicious entity operating in their environment. And once you've got that mindset, the board has more useful information. You can look for indicators of compromise. You can use AI to layer your responses. Once a third party is set up, for example, you can look for weird behavior afterwards. But yeah, it is a tricky job. So please don't feel too comfortable because, like I said, the tide at the moment gives benefit to the hackers rather than the defenders.
So we've spoken about how the blend of human insight and machine logic to look for those indicators of compromise is really powerful. But obviously that only works if you're feeding the right data into the system at the right time. So is there one particular type of signal that enterprises you feel routinely overlook?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's overlooked. I just don't think they have the ways at the moment to receive that data. So I'll tell you about a very controversial one. If I had my way, and listeners will probably not love this, I would have something that can listen to emails, or read emails, I should say, read SMSs, and listen to phone calls, particularly business phone calls, particularly for users who are in a privileged position within an organization. Because you can set up an artificial intelligence to have a very small context window, but have a very large contextual understanding of what is appropriate and what's not appropriate within an organization. That data would be so valuable. Imagine your phone starts vibrating and you are taught in an organization that the AI has picked up that you're having an at-risk conversation. There is examples of people being offered large sums of money for their two-factor authentication codes, and that comes through as an email. But right now, nothing is reading those emails that has contextual understanding. They're just looking for dodgy links, domains, whatever it might be. If you could get that data into an AI, I think you'd have a good chance of making it very difficult for most hackers to break into organizations, which is where I think we need to get to.
As we're moving towards the end of this episode, I wanted to really wrap up with some advice that you might give to particularly the leaders who are listening in. So say if you were speaking with a CXO, one who wanted to test their organization's defenses, what is one red team simulation or a simple test that they could run next week?
Yeah, absolutely. So I wouldn't jump into the deep end just yet with like penetration tests, for example, red team exercise. That's great. They are good things to do. I think you first of all need to make sure you got the basics right. So here in Australia, not to badmouth any organizations, but there are some that are just implementing multi-factor authentication. There are some that are still using SMS as a multi-factor authentication tool, which if you have a look at some of my information I've got out online, it's pretty easy for us to capture an SMS. I would get the basics right first. I would then take an approach of, there are so many threats out there, you can't understand them all. You don't know what's going to be invented tomorrow. First of all, understand what's important to your business. Is it your people? Is it your data? Is it, your access? Is it your whatever it might be to your organization? And layer controls around those. So the point that you want to get to is that no one control can be breached and then access your crown jewels. Once you've done that and you've gone through governance, risk and compliance and you've got everything right, you would then, I would suggest, move into a monitoring. So you want to be able to grab all that data and have useful ways to ingest that. So it might be AI, it might be a security operations center, it might be a risk operations center. Once you can properly move quickly, so there's an attacker coming in, it's there. Your board have a risk appetite. And if your company, let's say there's a sudden vulnerability on one of your firewalls, your switches, or some control protecting your environment, and your risk level jumps out of the comfortable level for the board, they need to know that. That's what an agile organization needs to be able to do these days. Once you're at that level, then jump into the red teaming exercises. I think one of the most effective ones is literally testing of social engineering. So do all your phishing campaigns, get people in the building. You'd be amazed how many organizations you can literally walk into the front door with a high-vis jacket and a ladder. There was a famous comedian here in Melbourne, I think, who did that exactly. That is a valid attack mechanism. And we are seeing in Australia now hackers from state-sponsored countries come in and do those style attacks. So I would cover the social engineering, and then, yes, do penetration testing on your technical stuff, your websites or your perimeter, but it's almost backwards now. I'd almost do that as a last step just to make sure there's nothing. And you shouldn't be doing one pen test a year. You should be constantly monitoring your perimeter for vulnerabilities.
And then finally, let's zoom out a little bit. We're all tracking the obvious risks, but there's always something that's new and exciting coming up. Perhaps exciting is not the right word. But looking ahead 6 to 12 months, what's one cyber risk that's not necessarily on a board's agenda, but should be?
Yeah, I think that we're going to see a massive tidal wave of more complex hacks. And the scary thing is, I don't think there's much, like, for example, if you take someone like myself and my sole focus is to break into an organization, I'm going to get in. And that's frightening. So we need to improve that. So, the one risk, it's so hard to put your fingerprint on one risk. I think a big one that's coming for Australia soon is the business email compromise with AI mixed into it. So there's some pretty interesting projects on the dark web getting out that will do your traditional business email compromise. Then it'll become completely contextually aware of what your business does. And then it can do clever things like change bank account details on the fly. So, for example, you can send an email, hey, is this the correct bank account details? The AI is aware of that. It will flip it back to the real one, send it back. Yes, that is correct. On the way back out on the end user screen, it's changed again. So those style attacks, your AP departments aren't going to withstand that style attack at the moment. So we almost need to create other processes, pick up the phone, have AIs check those things. I mean, I'm sending the challenge out to Australia, going all the R&D guys out there, all the developers, design systems to solve these problems because we're going to need them really soon.
Thank you so much for being here, for sharing so candidly, and for giving our listeners not just awareness, but action points which they can take back to their organisations.